You'll know if you listen to Talk Drive on a regular basis, there's only one lefty allowed on, because this man speaks more sense, and I'm actually thinking of becoming his agent. Matthew Torbitt, a very good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Hello, Jeremy. I'm well. How are you?
We only just met in a makeup room. Where are you now, man? This is ludicrous. Where are you, somewhere else now?
Yes, I'm in Parliament. I've been helping a couple of MPs today, and I heard you needed somebody, so I come rushing to your aid.
I'm surprised you're allowed back in Parliament, you anti-Labour person. Mate, can I be very honest? So we sort of arrived in the middle of the show. Show started, they're backslapping the Donald, the Keir. On the face of it, it's great. I mean, I just made the point. We've managed to get a deal before Europe. So far, we know that the US has removed tariffs on UK steel and aluminium, cuts the car rate to 10%. Car export tariffs reduced to 10%. That's 100,000 cars. Rolls-Royce engines, this is great. Aircraft parts, tariff-free. Mandelson says, ooh, tech. You would understand, though, there is a degree of cynicism amongst my 7 viewers and listeners, because yesterday the Indian deal, which was portrayed as this amazing thing, turned out to say to Indian temporary workers and Indian companies, don't you worry about NI, we'll just increase the British workers doing that. People are cynical, Matt. You'd understand that, right?
Yeah, and I was also cynical of the optics of the Indian trade deal. I didn't think were very good at all. And actually, these sort of tax trade-offs are very common. The Tories signed dozens of them previously, and the idea is, if we signed one and America had a similar scheme here, it would allow people in this country to go and work in America without being taxed twice, which is the right thing. Now, what is a bit of a kicker for people is when your NI is going up, and yet somebody who isn't from this country gets a little bit of a reprieve, and I get that. I actually thought the bigger kicker was it was worth less than 5 billion over 10 years, which is a bit of a pittance in GDP terms. That was my thing. I thought it's a big economy, but what are we really getting out of it? The American one, I think the Labour Party needs some good news stories, and as much as the people at home might not feel this is directly impacting their lives, you know, across the West Midlands where Jaguar and Range Rover are, people are going to be very pleased. When we're looking at British Steel and what needs to be done there to save Virgin Steel, they'll be very pleased. We're not getting the hormone-pumped beef. We're not getting the chlorinated chicken. The farmers are going to have access to US markets. So on the face of it, and I'm the same as you, I'm trying to read through the detail as quick as possible, it's not a bad deal, actually. I will give the Labour Party this one.
Interesting optics as well. The optics great, the timing, almost to the minute. The Winston Churchill, 80 years ago to this day, announced a victory in Europe, which is important. There are detractors, though, and Starmer has many detractors in this country. It's his moment right now, but as you quite rightly say, we're also talking about what it means for Great Britain. One of the things that's come out of all of this is there was a story yesterday, and I've had loads of texts saying this is all well and good, but what about the things that really matter? We discovered yesterday that to house migrants in migrant hotels for the next 10 years, not government figures, an independent body, £15 billion, Matthew Torbitt. And I put to you, because you and I know what you think about that, £15 billion to house illegal migrants. I haven't heard anything from Keir Starmer. Well, he rode back on this, but he's only going to save £1.5 billion, a tenth of that, by turning off the fuel and the heating of old people in the winter. And he rode back on that again. Didn't row back, just stood up to that in Parliament yesterday. And you can do your big deal with America and your big deal with India, but your problem as a Prime Minister is those pensioners, they don't understand that even anymore. That's worse for them. We're spending all this money. To me, that's ludicrous, pal. And that's where his problem lies, I think. That's all I would say.
I think, yes, regardless of the very large amount it's going to cost to house migrants as it currently stands, regardless of any trade deal, the amount raised, and I've always been consistent on this, the amount raised by the cut to winter fuel allowance is so negligible at 1.5 billion. I was always an advocate for what you could have done is to bring in even more money. You could put a 1% corporation tax increase. You're not going to have the optics of Doris freezing to death at winter. You're not going to have the farmers, because you could pack that in as well, but it'll bring in 3 times the amount. Now, the newspapers would say, oh, well, Labour are whacking business, and people half expect that from the Labour Party, but ultimately 1% is only 1%, but you're getting £7 billion that can go into all sorts of different things.
Buying the Chagos, selling the Chagos Islands.
Yeah, I mean, the Chagos is a weird one. I'm not an advocate for sort of giving things away, certainly paying people to take them off your hands. The only thing I think on this is 2 US presidents now, in Joe Biden and President Trump, have said, yes, fine by us. And I think if it was such a security issue, they would have raised more concerns than what they have. So unless they know more than what we do, I think that seems to be a sort of, it's been green lit, really. That's sort of in a way.
I think I agree. I just think my overall view of today is I'm not poo-pooing. If it works out to be good for parts of the UK economy, workers, businesses, that's great. We need to get the detail. But this screaming problem with migration accommodation, and I think of pensioners and I think of farmers and their plan. I mean, we have a couple of minutes, but all migrants will have to learn a higher standard of English under Sir Keir Starmer's latest immigration reforms as part of tougher plans to ensure they integrate into society. Many people in this country, Matthew Torbitt, will go, well, actually, it's not about integrating them into society. It's about saying you can't be in our society at the moment because our society is skint. And frankly, you're not bringing anything to our goddamn society. And I think that's the point that people are angry about.
Yeah, and I think this is where Reform have tapped into things very cleverly, because what Nigel has done very well is he's made this all about fairness. And he has a point. There is an element of people that certainly feel like they are being jumped the queue ahead of by people who have essentially just arrived. And what I've always thought is you need to revisit the 1951 Asylum Convention that the UN and we were signatories of in 1951, because what it says is if you were to claim asylum in any country, you have to be in that country. Now, what the Labour Party could do is twofold, and I know we haven't got long. You stop the optics of people coming across in the boats, therefore nullifying the threat of reform, because what you want to do is you want to set up offshore processing, have an offshore centre in Calais, let people do it in British embassies. And also, you give people the confidence in yourselves as a government, because national security means they've got to prove who they are at the embassy to even be considered in the first place. None of this chucking your passport in the channel and pretending you're from elsewhere. And you're not also having the economic migrants on the coattails of those that may well be genuinely fleeing persecution. And at the same time, when we're talking of fairness, as you know, I'm a big advocate.
20 seconds, pal.
I advocate for tackling homelessness. London councils are spending £4 million a day on temporary accommodation. There's a lot of houses and hotels that could be freed up for people on the streets if we tackled the migration issue.
Love having you on. Could not agree with you more.